Cheers.
Cheers, dude. Guys, I've got an awesome video for you today. I am sitting across the table from a good friend and the frontman and lead vocalist for the heavy metal band Siren, Doug Lee. Doug, what's up, dude? It's good to have you on here, man.
How you doing? It's nothing like having a good beer with some good friends and talking about some metal.
I don't think it gets any better than that, man. And by the way, this is part one of probably what's going to be like 4 or 5, maybe even a 6-part series with Doug Lee. So, Doug, dude, I want to know, and I'm sure my audience here wants to know, how you got started going back, because, you know, Siren, they've had their successes like recent after 30 years of being apart, and of course we'll talk about that. But I want to know, like, take us back, dude. What inspired you to get into music? Because we all get inspired by something. I mean, everybody watching, you guys, you know, you either had another musician or an event that happened in your life. What was the key moment that kind of got you into music and into heavy metal?
Well, I mean, it was a process. You know, I didn't start out into heavy metal. I started out with more probably childish stuff when I was a kid. You know, I had records of movies and stuff that had songs in them, and I would sing along with them, and I would listen to my parents' records and stuff like that. But when we moved to California in the 60s, that's when I started getting into the Beatles, but I didn't really start getting into metal till I started jamming with different guitarists around Brandon.
Now, were you singing at the time? Because I know we talked earlier, and you actually didn't start out as a lead vocalist, right?
No, my earliest recollection of playing an instrument was a drum set that I had when I lived in Alaska before I was even 2 years old.
Nice.
And that's where I started on. I don't know if my parents bought that for me or if it was some of their friends that thought it would be torturous for my parents, but that's where I started out, and eventually I started singing, and then I picked up the guitar years later. That's when I started getting into metal, when I started jamming with different people around Brandon. I used to jam with Rob Phillips, the first guitar player for Siren, and also David Austin from Nasty Savage. We used to get together and jam. You know, I'd get my dad's postal Jeep and go pick up somebody with some gear and go somewhere and jam, you know, and that's when we started doing Priest and Scorpions and Maiden and stuff like that, and working my way towards heavier material than what I was playing back in the early days.
I love all those bands you mentioned, dude. There's something magical about just that whole era of music, and you know, and back in those days, this is probably back in what, like the early 80s.
Yeah, it was in the early 80s.
You know, this area. So, Doug, you've been in Brandon, Florida for practically your entire life, and this area was like known as the metal capital of like the world at one point.
Yeah, it was definitely a hotbed. There was a lot of different bands here. A lot of bands forming, and for years, you know. I think going back to probably Nasty Savage was one of the earliest ones, and then us, and lots of bands came out of this area after that. You know, Obituary, and then heavier bands like Deicide. I think they were right outside of Dover there, and yeah, you never know where metal is going to prop up around here.
That's cool, man. So, dude, like, I mean, you started jamming, and you know, because a lot of us, we start jamming and playing guitar and doing all that stuff, but like, at what moment did things get really serious, and like at what moment did you get into Siren, or did you form Siren? How did all that come about?
I wanted to be a guitar player. I never wanted to be a vocalist, so that's how it all started out. But back in those days in Brandon, everybody was a guitar player. I kind of put down the guitar, and since there were already 2 guitar players in Siren at that time, there was Rob and Hal, and I don't think they were into like the Leonard Skinner style 3 guitar attack, so I kind of traded in some of my guitar stuff for my first PA because Siren needed a vocalist, and I don't know what some of the earlier history was, if there was another vocalist, but I don't think before I joined the band they didn't play any shows that I knew of, so we needed a vocalist with a PA that was mobile and ready to go, so I kind of jumped into that spot, and it was hard at first. I had to learn a lot of songs every day to get started.
All those things are valuable. Like if you're getting, especially back then, if you're getting into band, it's like, okay, you got a PA. You're good, but obviously you got the talent too, man. Because I mean, of course, you've got some amazing stuff, and we'll talk more about that later. By the way, guys, I want to let you know real quick, Doug, you have your own YouTube channel, so I'm going to have a link to his YouTube channel in the description of this video here, and I also have links to you guys' Siren's latest album and all that good stuff. So all those links will be in the description, by the way. So, but dude, yeah, I mean, getting started. So you were kind of like Doug Lee was kind of the culprit of what, you know, went from the garage band, so to speak, to now we're playing shows. And I know you've always had this burning passion, this burning desire. So like, this is what I'm doing with my life. This is, you know, so you gave your heart and soul. So tell my audience here about like some of the things that happened, the progression of Siren. I know you guys had some lineup changes and so forth. So take us through a little bit of that and some of the challenges you guys had.
Well, you know, our biggest thing was to get something out there, you know, that people could see, that, you know, to make our mark in the world of metal. And so we decided that we were going to do a vinyl single instead of start out with a demo cassette like a lot of bands were doing, you know, even though later on we did Iron Coffins, which was a demo cassette, and we did a Dead of Night after that in 1986. We started out with that single with Metro Mercenary and Terrible Swift Sword. Yeah, it was quite an undertaking. We had met up with some guys in a band called Avatar in an agent's office in downtown St. Petersburg, and that was before they changed their name to Sabotage. And they had a vinyl 45 that had City Beneath the Surface and The Whip, and there were 3 songs on there. So it was like almost like an EP on a 45. But I still have that record somewhere.
Oh wow, dude.
But that's when I guess we collectively decided that we wanted to do something more substantial than a demo cassette.
Yeah.
And we decided to get those singles printed, and, you know, we never looked back after that. Actually, when we released Up From the Depths a few years back, it actually came with the reproduction of the single, which was pretty cool. So,
and you know, dude, back then, like in today's era, you know, all of us, every guitar player and musician, both famous and not famous, we can all record right there in a bedroom these days. So recording back then, though, I mean, to have any kind of album out there or single or demo that was, you know, on an actual tape that was professional, I mean, dude, that was quite a bit of work.
Yeah, well, it cost a little bit of money too. You had to cough up some money to get that studio time, you know, and the tape cost money, and, you know, you had to coordinate getting everybody there because everybody had their own things going on, you know, their day jobs and whatnot. So it was quite an undertaking to do that. But that was our first experience in a multi-track recording situation.
Wow.
You know, I mean, that was before everybody had home studios like started to pop up, you know, later on. I guess in the mid to later 80s, there was a lot of that going on.
Okay.
Yeah, we wanted to make a statement. We wanted to do that single, and we wanted to get in the studio and do some multi-track recording. So our first effort was only 8 tracks, and it was, I believe that was on a half inch machine. You know, later on we did bigger, you know, 2-inch tape and 24 tracks, but it wasn't anything like the unlimited multi-tracking that you can do nowadays. That was what was available at the time, so that's what we did.
So, dude, you mentioned Sabotage. I didn't realize it had a name prior to that. So Avatar, it changed to Sabotage. But did you guys play with them or play like the same show or open for them or something like that?
We actually did open for them at the Ritz Theater, and I believe that was in I want to say that was in 1987, but it might have been in 1986.
Wow, dude.
We had a lot of fun. That was like a sold-out capacity crowd in there. It was crazy and wild. So we saw that, and we had a good time there, and we thought, well, why don't we just have our own show? So about a month or 2 later, we rented the Ritz, and we played our own show with 2 other bands that were coming up at the time, a band called Guardian and another band called Iced Earth.
Oh, wow, dude.
Which maybe some people have heard of.
Some of these bands, well, I know Nasty Savage and Sabotage, they were really up and coming, but some of the other bands probably were, you know, just like you guys, trying to get their name out there. So it's just a cool piece of history that Siren, you know, you're up there on stage playing to the same audience as some of these other bands, and just how all that happened, man. So, dude, being up on stage, that has to be it had to be the most awesome feeling in the world with that capacity of people, with that big crowd, you know?
Oh, sure. And, the first time we ever saw Sabotage play at the Golden Mug Pub or whatever it was called then, it had like 6 or 7 names back in the day. Yeah. When we went in there and saw Sabotage, we knew we had our work cut out for us, because here comes this band, and they were heavy. And they were loud, because back in the day, all we were about was mostly playing cover tunes. We had a few, originals, but we were heavily into the Priest and the Accept and Iron Maiden and all kinds of bands like that. They used to say, "Well, why don't you play something more commercial?" But we wanted to play metal, so it wasn't easy getting gigs back in the day. Not even in Brandon. If you wanted a gig, you kind of had to make it yourself. Right. And work for it, and then hope that your fans didn't get you tossed out of the venue by going crazy during the show. Yeah,
the show's probably got a lot rowdier back in those days than maybe today, where everybody's filming everything. So if you get out of hand too much, and you're on camera. But I'm sure back in those days, maybe it was a little more difficult to control crowds and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, it wasn't so much mosh pitting as it was furniture break-in and glassware break-in and things like that.
So, dude, you guys played shows, you did a lot of covers, but then I know you started, getting into your own material, writing more of that because you knew that was going to be how you would pass that threshold from, just, being a band that played covers to being Siren, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So being Siren, this is your thing now. You're a band just like these other bands that have already made it. You're tailing right behind them, but I know you guys were trying to get a deal. So take us through some of that, man, like trying to get that record deal. That was what it was all about back then. How was that going? Take us through that, dude, and like what were some of the frustrations of going through that?
Well, in those days, the internet was just in its infancy, so everything was done more with phone calls and mailing, and we did a lot of mailing.
Snow mail.
We had a lot of contact lists and a lot of contacts that actually Nasty Ronnie from Nasty Savage helped us to get some of the first contacts that we had, and it just started growing from there.
That's awesome.
Next thing you know, we were getting radio airplay in Europe on different stations, and they would send us the playlist, every month, and so things started happening. We got to be a little bit known out there, and we had by then we had 2 products out. We had the Iron Coffins demo, and we had the single, and getting ready to throw the Dead of Night demo out there. Yeah. So we started stirring up a little bit of interest. We had some offers from some labels that at the time I had nobody ever heard of. The hardest thing was keeping the band together, because everybody after a point, they're after you played so many shows, everybody's kind of like drawn off in their own different direction, and there was a lot of situations going on, people going to school and people working and stuff, so there was a lot of tension all the time trying to keep the band together. And I know we had gigs late at night a lot of times that we had to get like substitute musicians to play for us.
Oh wow, dude. Yeah.
Which a lot of time we use David Smith and his brother Kurt Smith, who was a guitar player, and David was obviously the drummer on our second album, Financial Suicide, later on, but I mean he was familiar with the Siren show and the Siren material, so he was a great fit. And then years later, he was a great fit to play on that album too. And that was like the second major lineup change that we did in 1988.
That's tough, man. I mean, I'll give you a little snippet of my very first band. I mean, we actually had some momentum. We were playing together for about a year and a half, and it was all original stuff. And we were actually gaining a little momentum. It was a Christian rock band way back in the day, but then like you said, people have school, they and if the band hasn't made it to that point to where it's promising, folks are real quick to jump ship and it's like, well, I better secure something else, which I guess I can't blame them, but it sounds like that's what a lot of people were doing, in Siren, just kind of here and there. It's like, okay, well, nothing's happened. So I don't want to say you never broke through, but at some point, I guess Siren kind of fizzled out. So, dude, what happened? Like, how was that?
Well, that was like in 1990. That was the breaking point after we had recorded Financial Suicide LP, and we come back here and enjoyed a little bit of success, and we were playing a lot of gigs. And then once again, there was turmoil in the band. There was differences of musical direction, and I didn't really like the direction it looked like we were going in. So yeah, everybody just decided to go their own separate ways. For some reason, Ralph Hubert from our label ARG Records, which later became Major International and Major Records, he had some project going. He invited me over to Germany to record 2 songs with some session guys to see how I could do in that kind of a pressure situation. So
awesome, man.
I later, thought that maybe he did that to see how I would do if I became the singer of Mekong Delta.
So I do want to get into your time with Mekong Delta, but we will do that in part 2 coming up, guys. So I want to talk about Doug's life after Siren, because again, I know you would put your heart and soul into Siren, and of course, Siren is still an active band today. But Doug, real quick, I just want to touch, and of course, this will be for later as well. We'll talk more in depth about this, but I know you're working on a solo project as well, dude. So I'm really excited about hearing what you come up with and that.
Yeah, me too. I want something a little bit different from Siren, and I got a lot of stuff that I wanted to get out there.
Yeah,
I need to get it out there.
You have to, man. It's part of you,
because there's more coming after that. So
yeah,
it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
I can't keep holding it all inside of me.
No, you can't.
It's too much.
Well, guys, on that note, again, make sure you follow Doug Lee's YouTube channel. I'll have the link to his YouTube in the description of this video here, and I'll also throw some links for Siren, because I want you guys, those of you who haven't heard Siren, you guys released that album, Back from the Dead, in 2020, I believe.
Yes, sir.
And of course, there's a documentary out there. And we'll talk more about this in the series to come. I know this video is getting lengthy here, so I wanted to break this up for you guys. But Doug, dude, thank you so much, brother. Thank you so much for coming on, man. This is a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to the next installment.
Yes, guys. Again, the links are in the description of this video. Be sure to check those out, and be sure to stay tuned for part 2 of my chat with Doug Lee. Until then, keep it metal.